The CSIS reports on the extensive foreign interference present in Canada. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. CBC reports that the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, that is the CSIS, has issued a warning that foreign interference operations have become normalized right here in Canada. Now, this warning was heavily redacted. What made it to the public purview only had a couple of the details, but from that, we do know that specifically China, they've put forward many efforts to distort news and influence media outlets right here in our home country. That is the primary concern at the moment. There are, of course, other countries there among the list, but the document didn't reveal everything. It was actually prepped for the eyes of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, so I imagine that in that document all the details are revealed to him and they're expecting a response from the Canadian government. They also don't want to stir up hostile feelings among the populace, so they're just given the bare minimum in terms of a notice to you. In response to these tidbits of information, critics are now renewing calls for Ottawa to take a tougher approach to foreign media interference. So, from the article, there are a couple quotes here. The first being that Chinese language media outlets operating in Canada and are members of the Chinese Canadian community are primary targets of the People's Republic of China, the PRC, and their directed foreign interference activities. So, these foreign states, they have a mixed approach. They're going to target both the mainstream media, in terms of print publications, radio, and televised programming, and the article is citing that they have a preference for ethnic channels of that. So you could think of something like Omni TV or Fairchild, groups like that, potentially being compromised, and non-traditional online outlets like social media. The big one that comes to mind is WeChat, and they're using these tools to pursue their goals. So what is the goals? What are they trying to do? The report says that foreign states are attempting to shape public opinion in Canada, debate, and covertly influence participation in the democratic process. One example, allegedly, of this is a former Conservative MP, Kenny Chiu, and he said that he was targeted during the recent federal election by a misinformation campaign run through Chinese language media outlets and social media. Chiu said he was attacked online and being painted as an anti-Chinese candidate after introducing a private member's bill that would require agents of a foreign government to register and report on their activities. Now, the actual impact of this alleged misinformation campaign is up in the air, but we do know that he did lose his riding by about 3,000 votes, so not a crazy margin, something that is overcomable. The question that comes up here is to what extent did these campaigns alter the results of the election? And further, look at the intent. If what he's saying is true, that because he was in favor of this bill that would require foreign entities acting as diplomats in Canada to report on their activities and to register, if China, for example, didn't like that, if their approach to curbing such a thing is to introduce the fear of losing an election into candidates, that could be quite scary and it could have a direct impact on what candidates are willing to say, especially while they're running. When they get elected, maybe they change their tune. And if this MP, Kenny Chiu, is saying that he thinks he lost because of the misinformation campaign allegedly coming from China, and he only lost by 3,000 votes, that could be something quite significant to look at. The fact of the matter is that no foreign state should be running any type of campaign in relation to our democratic process, period. That's non-negotiable. Regarding any bills or laws that you may or may not like, it's irrelevant. Keep your hands off our elections. Now, it is interesting to entertain the idea of, well, how many votes could you have potentially lost because of that? He lost by 3,000. Did the misinformation campaign amount to 3,000 votes? Maybe, maybe not. Did it amount to 100? 200? How many people have been influenced and had their actions altered by the actions of foreign states? According to the CSIS, it's running rampant. Foreign states are everywhere when it comes to media outlets, traditional and new, in Canada. So we do know they're operating. The question of impact is what's concerning. And maybe they gave those details to Trudeau. They didn't want to scare the public, but that's what I want to know. Try and estimate the influence that's being held here. to what degree are they doing the things that the CSIS is alleging? Earlier this year, the CSIS once again reported that foreign states were looking to bribe or blackmail voters and politicians even. Now, that same report said that some operations also rely on flattery, stoking the ego of the politicians and voters in a certain country. And honestly, Donald Trump comes to mind here. It feels like he'd be someone who'd fall victim to that. And the CSIS is claiming that Canadian entities were compromised in that same regard. And money was also a tool that was said to be on the table. Now here I can think about Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, and the oil collusions and the executive roles he's been given courtesy of groups like Russia and whatnot. Perhaps there are Canada counterparts to that. And even romantic entanglements to push their agenda. Now that's crazy. Imagine that. I wouldn't put any of these tactics past the likes of Russia or China, but having Canadian government officials tangled up in a mistress organized by a foreign government and holding that over their head, that'd be crazy. Hey, if you don't want us to expose to your wife and family and the world at large that you hooked up with one of our agents, well, you better vote in this way. Imagine that. The CSIS is alleging that these things have happened. They're not saying to who or if it was successful, but they were entangled, or at the very least, these tactics were utilized to push the agenda of a foreign government. I hope that at the very least an article like this breaks the la land spell that some Canadians are operating under. There is this notion that Western standards are applicable broadly across the world, where it's unthinkable that people will be acting against democracy and doing this and doing that. We never do it. Well, wake up call. There are many countries who are cool with using these shady tactics to push their agenda. And I keep thinking back to the NDP and their ludicrous notion of abolishing the military. Yeah, you want to do that? We're already inept as it is when it comes to combating modern age warfare. Information warfare is the new playing ground. We need more investment. Maybe more efficient investment is the word, but abolishing groups that are supposed to protect us, that's a terrible idea in the current climate. Evil has not gone away. It's put on a mask and maybe morphed its form. It's not directly AK-47 shooting up soldiers anymore, but the current way things are being played out arguably is even more scary, because average people are falling victim here, not just combatants. You also have to look at the current political climate that the West has erected, which is contributing to the power of misinformation from abroad. There are certain strange phenomena that we've somehow enacted and put forward into public life, such as the fact that people can't really criticize China openly without some fools saying it's racist or xenophobic or this and that and this phobia. And that's stifling. And it's actually stifling in favor of the entities who we know, according to many reports like what the CSIS is putting forward, are bad actors. It should go without saying that when people are criticizing the acts of China, they're talking about the government. I'm talking about people with power, not the average citizen there. This dynamic has not been entrenched in people's minds, and when they hear criticisms of foreign entities, they're quick to jump to intolerance and moral relativism. And the same thing happens not just with China. There are Middle Eastern countries where this comes up too, and it's destructive. Truly. If we're trying to identify why groups like China have been able to infiltrate our media and are able to influence people in the ways that they can, we have to look at ourselves too. We've contributed to that environment. When it comes to the hierarchy of public values, something like tolerance cannot be the number one trait. It just can't be. Something like truth belongs there. That's a far better guide to public conversation and discourse. The truth is not going to hurt points of views that are legitimate, but you could have illegitimate points of views because you're trying to create this facade of tolerance. We need the facts here. We have to understand what's going on. We have to act accordingly. Otherwise, you're a sitting duck. The most recent example that comes to mind of this strange way in which we're arguing these days is with the Omicron variant and closing down borders. Many people, even scientists' primary claim about that is that it's racist or xenophobic. That's totally irrelevant to the discussion. The question is it effective or not? Is closing down the border travel between countries that have a high incidence rate of this variant going to do something? Is it going to slow the spread? Clearly, it won't stop it completely, but will it slow it? Will it halt it to some degree? That's all that we should be caring about. And if the answer is yes, well, it might make sense. And if you have data showing really closing the border does nothing, then present that data and make the case based on facts, relevant, pertinent facts to the matter. Don't entangle the tolerance agenda into matters where it need not be. And interestingly enough, the woke are often hypersensitive to issues and aggressions that they find existing in Canada, but they pale in comparison to what other countries are doing, like what China is doing with Taiwan, or Russia with Ukraine, or China with the current genocide of the Uyghur minorities. Where are they to speak up about this? But they're quick to talk about the microaggression of not using the right pronoun for somebody. Just take these matters into account and weigh them on a scale. You got the first world problems over there, and you have the real world problems that are causing death and destruction over there. Which one deserves more of your attention? I don't know. Seems pretty clear to me. This is not to minimize and trivialize the struggles of those who exist in Canada. Clearly, issues remain here. Simply, it's an argument to put things into context and to adjust the dynamics of your worldview to account for that. Now, back to the article for a second here, talking about the influence that China is exerting on social media. This is interesting. People who make certain statements about the Chinese government are usually met with a ton of resistance, maybe from bots or real users, you'll never know. I had that personally happen to me. Take this situation into account. I was making the argument that not all foreign aid is called for. Actually, it has that type of shine to it, right? Foreign aid, it must be a good thing by default. Well, look at the numbers. In some cases it is, in some cases it's not. Foreign aid to sub-Saharan Africa, yeah, that makes sense to me. Sending foreign aid to China, that's ridiculous. The country is far more wealthy than us. Why are we giving them even $1 million? And I think that was the case. Canada was sending China something like $1 or $2 million in foreign aid a year, for whatever reason. And I was saying that's ridiculous. We have to re-examine our priorities here and get things straight. In the comments of that article that I posted, there are people who were fighting against that, arguing that I had my priorities backwards and what I was talking about made no sense. China deserved that $1 or $2 million. Are we going to turn away the helping hand? And that was astounding to me. It made me believe these were bots because anyone with a functional worldview would know how absurd what they're saying was. China, arguably the first or the second most powerful country in the world, one of the wealthiest nations in the world, looking to Canada for $1 or $2 million. Meaningless money to China, but it could mean something here in Canada. When Canada has many issues of their own, from healthcare to roads to whatever. It doesn't make any sense, but still, this interaction occurred. Now you can play this same game with other topics like the Uyghur genocide in China. Make these statements about that. Report on the facts of that matter on forums like Reddit, for example, and see how the comments play out, especially if you get traction. Make statements like Taiwan is a country and China has no right to absorb it. See how things play out. You can even do this on Twitter, maybe, with the right hashtags. It's quite interesting how that landscape is, and that's not even talking about something like WeChat, an entity that's completely controlled by the Chinese government. And you can bet that everything on there is in line with their agenda. And that's a major problem because many Chinese Canadians who have immigrated here are still using that technology. If you thought things were bad on Twitter, whoa, wait till you get a look at what's going on WeChat, probably. And the solution here isn't clear. It's not like Canada has any way to impose its will on the application. It's a foreign application run by the Chinese government. They will not comply with anything like that. So what do? Do you ban it? Well, there are many people who use that and they rely on it to talk to family members in other countries and whatnot. Would that be considered inhumane and cruel? Perhaps it would be, especially without an alternative. So China does hold the upper hand in that negotiation. You can consider WeChat to be a super spreader of misinformation and pushing the Chinese government's agenda. And Canada is sitting idle here because there isn't a clear path forward. What do you do? Now let's take a second to strategize here. If I was a bad actor, put me in the shoes of the likes of a Russia or the likes of a China, and I wanted to see the downfall of the West. What shall I do? What will I pull out of my bag of tricks to accomplish that aim? Well, the answer is obvious here. You let them implode. You allow the countries to destroy themselves and you feed them the information to make that occur. These countries of the West, Canada, America, Europe, they're far too strong to fight directly unless you want a nuclear doomsday. No party truly wants that, so we can't just put our troops on their border and hope to pressure them into submission. It won't work out too well. And that's true for the West versus China and China versus the West. It's a mutually assured destruction policy. So, how else can you achieve your aims? Well, look at the countries. The people are deeply divided. Left versus right. Politics and everything right now. So let's exploit that. Let's turn up the volume there. There have been reports of foreign actors setting up groups on Facebook for something like a Black Lives Matter rally and whatever, a QAnon right-wing rally to occur at the same place at roughly the same time. So these groups will meet each other and they'll clash. And no one's actually asking the question of how did these things occur? How do these people organize like that? Well, apparently sometimes foreign actors are the ones doing the organizing and they're letting the fireworks go off there. Perhaps sometimes they're the ones who are issuing the fake news narratives and letting people get drunk on it. Perhaps they're the ones sometimes pushing the that's racist, that's xenophobic trope to make sure people can't criticize them. And it's working. Perhaps they're doing what Kenny Chu, the former conservative MP, is alleging, that they're painting certain politicians to be anti-Chinese, even though Kenny Chu is Chinese himself, and they're making you lose elections because of things like that. They don't like your policy, so they're going to make attempts to curb and obstruct the democratic process. Maybe they're going to try and make you hate your neighbor. And of course, it's not all pinnable on foreign interference. Internally, we've done much of that ourselves. It's simply a matter of it being exploitable by the likes of Russia and China now. There's lots of healing that has to occur, and it seems like we've taken a step back in that regard. And of course, that's an opportunity for other countries, bad actors who want to see the downfall of the West. This is surely a story to keep your eyes on. As I've said, the CSIS has given the full document to Justin Trudeau and the government, and we'll see if any actions come out of this. I doubt it, but it is a matter that has to be taken more seriously. And even here, there are questions of, well, are the right people in the government to do anything about it to begin with? Do we have cybersecurity experts? Do we have leading innovators and engineers and people like that? I don't think so. Many of those people are off somewhere else making a lot of money and not toiling away with the government. So, something to see. I will keep you up to date on the latest in that matter. So with that, it now brings us to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoy the content, be sure to leave a review and share. They'll help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.